In this series of videos I'm attempting to repair and restore a Toshiba TOSCAL BC1411 Nixie tube calculator. In the first video in this series I stripped the machine down, we had a quick look at the boards, and this is the chassis out of the unit, and you can see it's got some bent parts on it. It needs straightening out, but what we'll do in this video is go through the chassis, get it tidied up, fix any faults with it that we can find, and go from there. What I've done so far, I haven't cleaned this yet, at least I haven't cleaned the mechanics of it yet, but what I've done so far is gone through and cleaned the edge connectors. So we've got 16 edge connectors in this, and the boards obviously just sit in this rack. Normally to clean things like this I'll use a brush dipped in isopropyl alcohol, but because there was so much, it's not really corrosion, it's more sort of oxidation that we get on the contacts on these, and because there was so much I've resorted to using this. It's contact cleaner. I don't use this very often, despite the number of repairs that I do, but for something like this it does work very well. And the way I go about doing this, so I take some business cards and I stack them up until I've got a stack that's thick enough to fit fairly comfortably but fairly snugly into the edge connector. I then go along, spray the edge connector with the contact cleaner, and then I'll work the card in and out maybe 10 times or so, and I keep repeating. Then I wipe off the excess with some kitchen towel, and I keep repeating that until the card comes out clean. So if we take this third one down as an example, the first time I did this, this is what the card came out looking like, and you can kind of see all the dirt that comes out, and it is fairly well adhered to the contacts, and I've got a feeling this might be largely what's wrong with this machine. And I've done this for all the contacts now, but as I said, this was the third one down on the left as we look at it the first time I tried it. If we go back over this now, and I repeat the process, you can see now that it's coming out pretty much clean. So the first time I did that it came out looking like this, and now it's gone darker because obviously it's wet with the contact cleaner, but there's almost no dirt coming out now, so that's got rid of most of the oxidation that's on the contacts. And these really were bad. Looking under the microscope, you couldn't see any bare metal on the contacts at all, so it may well be, as I said, that's what was causing a problem with this machine, but we'll have to see. Next thing I want to do with this is check all the connections on the base. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get a multimeter, and I'm going to check, let's get the multimeter out, and all I'm going to do, I've got it on continuity mode, I'm going to check between the wire wrap wire on the outside and the actual tip of the pin, and I should obviously be able to get a contact. I'll do that with all of them, make sure that they are giving a reliable contact. Any I find that aren't, I'll remake the connection, I'll unwrap the wire, clean the pin, and then rewrap it, and that will hopefully eliminate any issues with the connections on these wire wrap terminals. I won't do it on camera, it'll take an hour or so, and if I do find anything I'll get back on camera and just show you how I go about correcting these. Okay, I've tested all these connections. Fortunately none were broken. Despite the appearance, they all seem fairly intact. One other thing I'm doing as I'm going along is I'm checking to make sure that the wires aren't broken. Sometimes the wires will fracture where they've been stripped. If someone's kind of dug the stripper too far into the wire when they stripped it, it can nick the wire and eventually it will just fracture. So I'm just very gently easing each one to see that it's properly attached, and again, if any are broken I'll just remake the connection. If we find any that are any of these contacts that are actually broken off on the other side, on the PCB side, sometimes the fingers that contact the PCB can snap off, and rather than replace the entire connector, what I do is I unwrap the wire, find one of the connectors such as this one where it has unused pins, pop the connector out, and I'll fit that into the one that's broken, and it just saves me having to replace the connector. Okay, so that's the underside done. Still needs a clean, but is fundamentally sound. I haven't found any poor connections. Once this is all cleaned, I will go over this again to make sure that nothing's been disturbed and all the connections are good. On a machine like this, it's kind of a false economy to skip past that. It does not take very long. It looks like it will take forever, but it does not take very long. It takes probably 2 minutes per connector, so it's fairly quick to do. But it can save you hours of fault finding. If you've got a fault that's caused by one of these, and especially if it's intermittent, that can really be a pain to find when you're trying to hunt through the PCBs, because trying to find a fault in a PCB that's not on the PCB obviously can take a very long time. Okay, we'll get this flipped back up the right way. And the next thing I want to do is straighten this kink. It's the same on both sides. I think this has been dropped and just the weight of the keyboard has kind of moved this across. You can see the pins also skewed. I'll just zoom you in so you can see it a bit more clearly. So hopefully you can see that chassis rail is fairly badly bent. It's not terrible. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of material on this. It's very thin support, so it's fairly easy to bend, but it does mean it's also fairly easy to bend back. So we'll get that straightened out, and then I'll give the chassis a good clean, and as I say, go over it again, make sure the contacts are still good, make sure the release levers move freely, which they seem to, and we'll then be ready to start looking at the electronics. That's the chassis done. I've given it a good clean. I've gone back over all the connections to make sure they're intact. I've straightened the two side cheeks so they're now looking much better, and just gone back over the connectors one more time, giving them a final clean. Had a look at them under the microscope, and now pretty much all signs of the oxidation that was on there has gone, and gone back through with the credit cards and contact cleaner, and it's looking very good. It's as I say, I've been back over and tested all the wire wrap connections again, and I think this is now 100% as far as I can test it like this, and we're ready to move on to the next phase of the repair. So in the next video we'll get the power supply on the bench, go through that, make sure the supplies are regulated properly and that they can handle the load that will be put on them, and then we can refit that to the main chassis and start looking at the boards.